Moon Knight's Ankh is one of the most powerful tools within Marvel Rivals, and this video is going to give you 5 tips you didn't know about Moon Knight's Ankhs and how to use them. So the first tip is that Moon Knight can place 2 Ankhs down at the same time. Now, as you can see, there's 2 Ankhs there, and you probably already knew this anyway, so this is nothing new. But what is new to you is the fact that the way the Ankhs actually work here is that they don't bounce directly between each other. That's not how it works. So as you can see here, when we fire into this Ankh, it's only hitting this target and this target. And if we fire into this Ankh here, is going to fire into the 2 enemies that are within the range of that Ankh in the first place. Now, the only time this stops working is what I call the Ankh intersection. So we need to make sure that enemy dies first. So somehow we need to make that work. And then if you fire into this Ankh, it will then bounce to this guy, then to this Ankh, then to this guy. But the guy that's over here needs to be dead first. So it's a really weird concept on the way this actually works. But they do bounce between each other. However, you do need to have an enemy in this intersection right here, which is what I call the Ankh intersection. This can be touching like basically edge to edge, so it doesn't really need to have that big of an intersection, but there does need to be an enemy in between the 2 Ankhs before they can bounce between each other. Otherwise, it's not going to work at all. Now, the other tip is also quite interesting as well with the way this works. So as you can see, this enemy is within the Ankh and this one is not. But he's within a 7-meter distance of this enemy. So if you hit this Ankh, it's still going to damage this enemy here. So even if the enemies are within a 7-meter radius around your Ankh, and there's only 1 enemy inside your Ankh, they're still going to take damage. So as you can see here, they will still take damage even if only 1 enemy is inside your Ankh. So this is very, very useful because you don't need to aim this in a big crowd of players. You need to aim this to the target that's going to be the slowest to move. So this is going to be their tanks. So the next tip people give when it comes to using Ankhs within Marvel Rivals is a mistake in my opinion. So people tell you to put Ankhs on walls. Now what this does is it puts the radius on the wall, which is the largest area for this. So as you can see here, the largest area is the spherical radius. So that is from this edge to this edge, which is actually 10 meters because the radius is 5. You double that, obviously the diameter will then be 10. Also the height is 5 meters, so you're actually halving the distance you can use the Ankh in because it's only going to be a 5-meter height instead of a 10-meter diameter, which is way wider than what you're going to get there. So it's a bit silly to put it on walls in my opinion, because for example, we'll show you what I mean here. So if we put the Ankh on this wall and the enemy is right here, and we'll ping the enemy, that's 7 meters, so he's outside the distance. And if we try and fire at this enemy, it's not going to deal any damage. But if this Ankh was on the ground within a 7-meter distance, he would be dying. So if the Ankh was basically facing down the way, he's now taking damage. So it doesn't really make any sense to put the Ankhs on walls because you're basically reducing the area that you can do this in. Now, obviously, if you put it really close to the enemy, for example, like right here, then this will definitely deal damage still. But that is only a 3-meter distance, and I'll quickly show you just to show you the actual proof of this. So that is 3 meters from there to there. So the next tip with Moon Knight's Ankhs, and the one that people do give that's pretty good advice, which is placing the Ankh behind the enemies. Now, I think this is great advice, and the reason for that is because they have to turn around to then obviously destroy your Ankh. If they don't do it, they're going to be basically getting free damage done to them, and they do need to focus that Ankh and take it out. But another thing that's really important with Moon Knight as well is trying to gain high ground when you're doing this, because your placement's going to be so much more accurate. If you've got a good line of sight on the enemy and you're trying to place an Ankh behind them, you're now able to do this way easier. So as you can see here, we can place it there. And this is way better now in terms of Ankh placement. So I definitely recommend you always get high ground before you place your Ankh, even if you're jumping in the air, whatever it is, to then place the Ankhs down, whether it's to use the zip line. Now you've done that, you're dealing damage, you're doing your thing, and you're going to get dived on. So how do you counteract this? So only 1 Ankh you really need, because not only do you have the radius inside the Ankh, but as we've shown in our previous tips, you've got a 7-meter radius outside of that as well if there's 1 enemy inside the Ankh. So the other Ankh should be placed on your feet. And the reason why you should do this is for dive enemies. So if anyone's trying to dive you, for example, this guy here, we can basically just hit the Ankh as many times as we need to whilst we're standing on it still. and basically we're going to be dealing damage to whoever comes inside to try and dive us. So we've got one on the team here, which will get destroyed very often, but the one that you're standing at is not really going to get destroyed, and these unks last forever, providing that they don't take any damage, or providing you don't place 2 more unks down, and then this obviously one will disappear at some point if you place 2. Another tip with Moon Knight's unks is when you place them, they pull enemies in, and as you can see here, it's pulling the enemies towards the unk itself. Now, so when you're using his ultimate, what you want to do is you want to jump up, throw an unk, and then place his ultimate down, and that's going to put all the enemies inside this radius. I think this is an extremely useful way of using Moon Knight's ultimate with his unks to combo with yourself, because it just means you're going to be dealing tons of damage, and obviously any enemies that remain inside this, whether they have high health or they're getting healed up, you can still finish them off with the unk, obviously, because you've already placed it. Now, the last and final tip when it comes to Moon Knight's unks, and it's one of the most important ones, is you don't always need to aim for the unk itself. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because you should still practice with Moon Knight's aim so you can hit the enemy targets that are inside your unk, because sometimes you might not be able to see the unk itself, but also sometimes you actually want to aim to hit the enemy player first, and the reason why is because of critical hits. So if you're trying to deal critical hits to this enemy, you're dealing way more damage, and the damage drop off is by a 20% basis. So if you're dealing more damage to the head, that 20% reduction is not as much as if you're just hitting straight body shots. So if you're hitting straight body shots, then it's taking 20% off of that. It's way less damage than if you're landing headshots, and it's taking 20% off of that. As you can see, that enemy's dying way quicker now. And what's great about Moon Knight is that both of his attacks have critical hits, so you can actually still rip through enemies so fast. So there we have it. Hopefully you learned something new about Moon Knight's unks, but we will be releasing a full guide on Moon Knight himself and all of his other abilities in the future, so please subscribe for that, and thank you very much for watching.